Welcome to the Early Edge NFL Player Prop Show, brought to you by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. I am your host, Eric Cohen. Excited to be here on a Friday. It is time to tee up some NFL props for the weekend, and we have you covered with at least 13 of them here on this show. But let's bring in last week's recap to see how we did. And Matt Gay let me down. Matthew Stafford, that game was a disaster for me. Not good for me. Proppy 2 and 3. Uncle Dave 3 and 2. Nice to see. And Sia 2 and 1, nicely done. So all three of us on the season are above 500. I'm one game above 500. Uncle Dave is as well. Proppy 6 above 500. But I am feeling pretty good this week to see how we'll do. So let us bring in the stars of the show. We have the Fantasy Hall of Famer from CBS Sports, the one, the only, Uncle Dave. Dave Richard from, as I said, CBS Sports. Check out his fantasy rankings and more at cbssports.com. And from what looks like a different setting, I'm going to guess, knowing that he's been doing so well in the NBA lately, that the one and the only Propstarz is in a penthouse this week. Am I correct?
You are factually correct, EC. What's up, Uncle Dave? I am in a penthouse at the beautiful A Casino and Resort. What a stunning hotel for those of you who have not been here and you're in the Pacific Northwest. I'd highly encourage you to, but I want to say, guys, my results by my standards have been mediocre in the NFL. I'll be the first one to admit that. A said, you know what, this guy, he's been schlepping it too long amongst the plebs. Let's put him in a penthouse suite, because we got to see these results increase. So I am in this beautiful suite, guys. I wish I could show you. I gave EC and Dave a tour of it, a virtual tour of it, before we came on stream, and it has certainly rejuvenated me, and I'm feeling the energy and the good vibes. I absolutely love my picks this week, and I'm going to call my shot right here. I think we're going to go undefeated.
Well, so then that would tell me that in order to break a slump, and by your standards, Proppy, you're saying that you're in a slump, all you have to do is stay in a fancy schmancy suite. That's all it takes to break a slump. Okay, maybe
that's what it takes for me, Uncle Dave. I enjoy the.
I'll be coming to you live from the penthouse from my fancy couch with beautiful artwork behind me. Yes, the penthouse is where I shall be.
You know, I feel like I'm missing something in life where I'm not getting any penthouses. Uncle Dave, now you're in the penthouse in Fort Lauderdale, so I get it. And you have a very luxurious office. I just have some decorations behind me. All right, Proppy, I want to talk before we get going into this. One thing that SportsLine has going here is Discord. And you were live on there chatting with everyone this week. Just tell us about that experience.
Yeah, for SportsLine subscribers, I want to credit you, EC, and the maestro, Larry Hartstein. Both of you guys were instrumental in developing this idea of getting a Discord for SportsLine subscribers. I believe we have close to 2,000 members in there. I've been in there. I've had a couple of expert chats in there, which have been amazing. I've really enjoyed conversing with so many interesting people in there. So I highly encourage you, if you're not a SportsLine member, what are you doing? If you are a SportsLine member and you don't know, you have access to this Discord, which basically gives you access to almost every expert at SportsLine, including yours truly. Picks will go up in there that are exclusive to the Discord, and it's just a really great environment. I see a lot of people who are sharing picks, just a lot of great information being shared back and forth. I also want to mention there are at least a dozen or so people that have DM'd me in there. I've yet to respond. I promise you I will get back to all of you guys by the end of the weekend. And if you're not in the Discord, get your butts in there.
And there you have it. All right, Uncle Dave, it's time for picks. We're going to start with you and a player who a lot of people think is going to go nuclear, should I say this week, from the New Orleans Saints. Who would that be?
That would be Alvin Kamara, who should get over the line that I gave Jake the Snake was 81.5. I actually saw it a notch lower at 80.5 minus 128, but I'm playing this one all the way up to like 85.5. And let's be real, the matchup is the story here. The Giants have allowed 5 yards per rush and a 10.7% explosive rate to running backs this year. That's bad for them. That's great for Kamara. And now New York will play this game without Dexter Lawrence clogging the A-gaps. They won't have Bobby Okereke. They won't have Nacho, Raheem Nunez on the defensive line. This run defense is going to get worse before it gets better. I don't know if it ever gets better. This is going to be a huge opportunity for Alvin Kamara to come through. And it's a high number. I admit it. For Alvin Kamara, he's only gone over this 4 times all year. And that includes last week against the defense that's a little bit better than this one. But we've seen it from him. We've seen him get the workload. There's no Taysom Hill to steal carries away. There's Kendre Miller coming off of IR, potentially might take away a few carries in the game. But Alvin Kamara is somebody who I think can go out and have triple digits. And what does this bet, clogged gutters and placing the star atop the Christmas tree, have in common?
I'm baffled, Uncle Dave.
I think that's one that even like the greatest minds of our time would have a trouble answering.
I'm sitting with 2 of the greatest minds of our time. What they have in common is you're going to need to break out the ladder for all 3 of them. I think that there's a huge chance here to play Alvin Kamara. Like I said, I'm only going to play it up to 85.5 on this prop line. But if I wanted to do a little bit of sprinkling on plus 90, plus 100, plus 110, I think that's about as far as I'll go. I think he can get there. I think this matchup is just too good. Alvin Kamara over 81.5 rush yards at minus, I think 115 is what I gave you. But I've also seen it over 80.5 at minus 128.
Proppy.
This is going to sound like a shameless plug, but for those of you who are in my expert chat, you can all attest to this. The great RJ White, who is arguably as good as any NFL bettor that we have at all of SportsLine. He was in my chat, and he asked me the only non-basketball related question, because I was there to discuss primarily NBA hoops, was a question from RJ, and it specifically was what number I anticipated Alvin Kamara's rushing line opening at, because RJ felt that basically he wanted to play almost any number. I guessed it would be between 76 and 78.5, so I was fairly close. But this is a prop that also RJ White absolutely loves and fully endorses, and he was eagerly anticipating slamming this number as soon as this line became available. So just wanted to mention that.
Hey Dave, did you buy a new ladder with the $100 that Proppy sent you this past week from your Sam Darnold bet?
I've already got a ladder. I'm gonna have to think of something else that I could get to use that money on. Yes, for sure.
It was close. It was close. I mean, you had under 30. Yeah, go ahead.
Like,
yeah.
I'm thrilled that I went 3-2 last week. It's been a minute since I've had a plus 500 week, but we got really lucky with Sam Darnold. There were a bunch of plays where he dropped back to throw, got pressured, ran out of the pocket. Bunch of times he got sacked. Arizona's defense is legit, by the way. I know that you've seen that, EC, living out that way. But I think we got real lucky getting away with that one with Sam Darnold last week. But it still counts. It's still a dub. $100 coming my way.
Uncle Dave 1-0 in showdowns this week. All right, Proppy, you got to make up that $100 somehow. Let's talk about Uncle Dave's elevator buddy for our next prop. Do tell, James Cook.
The great elevator body, James Cook. Yeah, we're going to back James Cook this week, gentlemen. I'm going to take a combination line here. 78.5 combined rushing and receiving yards. Going over, by the way, for James Cook. I'm comfortable playing this one up to 81.5, although I do think the 78.5 is widely available here. I love this spot for James Cook. Facing a Rams defense that's a significant run funnel. The opposing teams that play the Rams, their PROE, the pass rate over expected, -3%. Teams are opting to run heavily against the Rams. And you know why? It's because their run defense isn't very good, and they're very susceptible to giving up chunk plays, which happens to be James Cook's specialty, especially in between the 20s. This guy is, while he hasn't made a big impact in the passing game, that was sort of his MO coming out of South Carolina and into the NFL, that he was a passing down specialist. And we saw in his rookie year and his sophomore year, he was a lot more involved in the passing game. He's been really effective as a runner. They really haven't needed to utilize him, nor have the Bills really been playing from behind a whole lot this season, which is what I attribute to his receiving numbers having dipped off compared to previous years. But he's extremely efficient, coming off of 100 yards rushing last week against San Francisco. This is another real plus matchup for him. I think this game could potentially be up-tempo as well. I think he's going to pick up a ton of chunk plays in the game. So I will take the combination line over 78.5 rushing and receiving line. I also really like his rushing yards as well.
Sadly, we do not have a David Njoku prop. That's Uncle Dave's other buddy that I believe, has ridden elevators with that we've discussed.
That was he almost sent me to the first floor with an uppercut.
He almost dangled Uncle Dave out of an elevator.
Hey, Proppy, how do you feel about Nola Face in the chat said, how do you feel about James Cook over 13.5 for his longest run? That's an interesting bet.
I love
that quite a bit. Yeah, I hadn't even seen that, but I love that. James Cook, again, he's got a little bit of a boom-bust profile, and he picks up big plays in chunks. And again, this Rams defense, very vulnerable, susceptible to giving up big plays. So I think that's a great look.
So, Uncle Dave, the best defense in the NFL in yards allowed is Proppy's Eagles, who are just absolutely dominating teams right now. Yet you have 2 Panthers props in this game. We're going to, which is interesting. But we'll start with your running back prop, a player who is overachieved and got himself a long-term deal, but I feel like he's starting to be phased out more, and you're leaning that way as well.
I don't think he's being phased out more, but I think he's fading. And when you think about how he's done the last couple of weeks, it makes you want to take the under on his combo prop. It's Chuba Hubbard. I like the under of 70.5 total yards. It's not that high of a number, but I still think it's going to be tough for Chuba to attain this against Philadelphia. He was way over this when he played the Giants in Week 10, but since then he's been under against good run defenses. It was the Chiefs. Maybe I'm using the term good run defenses a little loosely when I talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but that's who he's played in the past 2 weeks. He's been under this prop line. His rushing has been on a downward spiral. He's averaged 14 carries and 50.5 rushing yards in his past 2 games. His receiving, barely existent. Forget about the last 2 games. He has 2 or fewer catches in 5 of his past 6 and 16 or fewer receiving yards in 9 straight games. So now you're telling me that he's going to be a bigger part of the passing game against Philadelphia? I don't buy that for a second, especially since Jonathan Brooks last week had 3 catches for 23 yards. That's more than Chuba Hubbard's had in a game in 2 months. And everybody's expecting this to be a blowout, right? Proppy, give me a nod. You think Philadelphia is going to go and crush Carolina? That's the game script that I think, obviously, we're looking for with Chuba Hubbard. But I honestly wouldn't be shocked if the Eagles overlooked Carolina a little bit, and this was a competitive, low-scoring game. And even in that scenario, I don't think Chuba Hubbard gets 71-plus total yards in the game. 9 running backs have had over 71 total yards against the Eagles this season, but all except 2 of them needed at least 20 receiving yards to help them get over the hump. I don't think Chuba's going to do that. I don't have a funny joke to wrap this up. I'm just going to say take under 70.5 total yards on Chuba Hubbard at -115 from our boys at BetMGM.
Prop.
I like this quite a bit from Uncle Dave. Has my full endorsement. I do have a question, a challenge to the chat. Speaking of this game, if we look at the other team they're facing, the Philadelphia Eagles, and we look at that backfield, there's a running back with a prop line of 113 rushing yards. I challenge the chat to find me the last running back who had a prop line higher than 113.5 yards in a single game. Please, EC, if you could let me know who answers that question correctly.
Do you know the answer, Proppy? I actually have a guess.
I don't know, but I think I could figure it out pretty quickly. So
I would say, if I were to guess, the tail end of the 2020 season, one running back was crushing at the end of the year and ended up going above 2,000 yards. I think in his last couple of games, including, I think the last one was against the Texans, Derrick Henry had a rushing line like that. But since then, probably
Jonathan Taylor would be my best.
Yep. Uncle Dave, any thoughts that you would throw in there?
I won money on that because Houston's run defense was so terrible, and I think it was Henry. I'm not 100% sure.
He was definitely triple digits versus Houston, I think, on numerous.
Yeah. It's somebody like that. It's either him or Taylor, like you said, and it was definitely against Houston.
Yeah, and we're not talking about a combo line. We're just talking strictly rushing. That's a great question, though. Yeah, that's a great question. That Saquon line is monstrous. But Proppy, you're fading a guy who's having a really good year. Unfortunately, 11 fantasy teams, I have him in 0 places this year, and that is a big mistake. No wonder I'm having a terrible fantasy year. Kyren Williams, but this week against Buffalo, you're not as optimistic.
I'm not. And if we look at Kyren Williams this year, yes, he has been very productive. but he hasn't been very efficient. What he's relied on has been an elite workload and tremendous volume. And he has a massive snap share in that Rams offense. He's one of the true workhorses in the NFL. However, last game, Blake Corum had a 32% snap share in that offense. Kyren Williams was at 68%. And while for a normal running back, that's certainly a good number. Kyren Williams is used to being in the 90 percentile range. So that is a significant decrease for him as far as his snap share is concerned. And then when you're not getting that elite volume, you need to be efficient. And I think he's going to struggle from an efficiency standpoint against this Buffalo Bills defense that's been very good, specifically against the run as well. Top 10 in EPA allowed per rush, top 10 in success rate against the rush. Another thing Buffalo has working for them, in my opinion, in this game is potentially game script. I think Buffalo is going to be able to move the ball, a la why we like James Cook. And I do think we could see a scenario where they're potentially up double digits, kind of forcing the Rams to abandon the run and to throw it and air it out, which also could potentially result in decreased volume, rushing volume for Kyren Williams, who, again, over the past 4 or 5 weeks has really struggled from an efficiency standpoint. The yards per carry has begun to decline here. So, not playing his best football. Blake Corum starting to emerge, maybe earning a little bit more of a workload in the backfield, coupled with a really difficult matchup, makes him look like a pretty strong fade to me against a good defense in Buffalo.
Interesting. All right, fair enough. We will take that guidance, and you never want to fade Proppy as far as I'm concerned, so we fade Kyren Williams instead. Uncle Dave, this next one is for you, and I want to ask about it because I always look at your rankings when I do these player props. And
Sure.
Usually if you're high on a player, I say, okay, feel pretty good about this after I come up with it. This one is a player you're not high on, but I am, and I'll explain. James Conner over 79.5 rushing plus receiving yards for the Cardinals at minus 118. So let's throw out the game from a couple weeks ago. The Cardinals abandoned that rushing attack against Seattle inexplicably when they were still in the game in the second half. Don't understand it. So let's just toss that out. Conner is over this in 8 of 12 games this year, and 10 running backs are over this number against the Seahawks this season. In Week 18 last year against Seattle, Conner had over 200 combined yards. So, and I know it's obviously a different defense, Mike McDonald now coaching there, but it's not like James Conner is chopped liver here. I feel like this line is just too low. But here's the thing that sold me on it. 71% of James Conner's runs are gap runs. Seattle against gap runs has the third lowest stuff rate and the third highest success rate allowed to those gap runs. I think James Conner, and I'm not using the word nuclear or anything like that. I would ladder up to 100. I really feel good about this James Conner line. Uncle Dave, can you see where I'm coming from here, or is James Conner still a fade for you?
I'm debating whether or not I want to challenge you to a showdown on this one. And I hate to say it because I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable with it. But when I've watched the Cardinals play, and really this started, I can't pinpoint when it started. It was either the game 2 weeks ago against these Seahawks or the game before that. The offensive line started to fall apart for Arizona. And it's kind of put it's made the whole offense struggle quite a bit. Now they came out of it to a degree last week against the Vikings. They were able to go on a bunch of drives. You'll remember the conversation that I had with Proppy about Kyler Murray and whether or not this was a good spot or a bad spot for him. Proppy had some great points about his EPA. What ultimately ended up happening was Kyler Murray was good, not great. His fantasy numbers weren't great. And what they ended up doing was settling for a lot of field goals. So now I've got some concerns about how they'll operate in the red zone. But on top of that, I'm worried that James Conner might not quite be at the same level that he was earlier this year. Mm-hmm. And I'm also worried about just how easy this matchup is. You brought up the numbers for Seattle's run defense over the course of a season against power runs, and that's what you are banking on with James Conner doing well. I can tell you that in Seattle's last 3 games, they're giving up 3.6 yards per carry to running backs on power runs. Not that they've been challenged a lot by it, Eric. The fact that they've only been run on 17 times in 3 games with power, that speaks a lot more to the competition that they've played and what they decide to do. Arizona might decide, you know what, we're going to use our strength. We're going to try and use those power runs, and they might have a little bit more success. I'm just telling you that what the Seahawks have seen in their last 3 games, it's been 3.6 yards per carry. Where I think you do have a shot with this, and why I'm ultimately not going to challenge you to a showdown, EC, is that James Conner has been involved in the passing game. And I think you're going to need that to really come through. If he goes over this, I would guess he goes over it by less than 10 yards. I think it's a competitive line. I don't think it's designed one way or the other. I don't think it's a sucker bet by any stretch, but I do think you're going to need a lot of help from Conner in the passing game. And that is one thing that the Cardinals can continue to use. And they did use it against Arizona or against Seattle when they played them a couple of weeks ago to negate the weakness of that offensive line. And I'm sorry to go on with this. So I think you've got a shot with it, but it's not my favorite line.
Fair enough. Okay, Proppy, go ahead.
If anyone was wondering why Uncle Dave has Hall of Fame credentials, that last 2-minute and 30 soliloquy was exactly why. That was tremendous, incredible information, and what a thorough explanation. And I feel significantly just smarter after hearing that.
And that's exactly it. I feel
EPA, Properu.
What was that, Dave?
Seattle's defensive rush EPA in their past 3 games against power runs.
Impressive, yeah.
2.03. That's good.
Yes.
This is why you watch this show or you listen to this show, because you learn. I mean, I'm learning. I made the play and I'm sticking by the Conner play, but Uncle Dave's right. Maybe I'm not going to hammer it. I'm not going to add on to my original bet with it like I was going to. All right, Uncle Dave, while you're giving some thoughts here, here's a good one from the chat. We had 2 running back plays I want to get to here. Kale says he likes Isaiah Pacheco's over at 49.5 for rushing yards. Scott likes Braylon Allen's over at 52.5. Would you agree with both of those, or is there one that you would prefer over the other?
If you're asking me, I love the Pacheco one. I would stay away from the Braylon Allen one. I haven't done my full research on the Jets run game since Breece Hall was ruled doubtful for the game. But I know that Isaiah Davis got in the mix last week, and that is a fast running back that's going to be involved in that Jets run game. They're going to use 2 running backs. I would imagine that Braylon Allen will have the best chance to score, and he might even be the better receiver of the 2. But they're both fast, and they're both good, but this is still going to be an offense that Aaron Rodgers is going to pilot, and it's an offensive line that seems to be getting worse as the season goes on. We could talk about offensive line play all day. There are so many offensive lines that are in bad shape. It's week 14. So what's happening with Arizona, man, it's happening across the league, and the Jets are no different.
Proppy?
I think Dave hit the nail on the head. The Pacheco line I like a lot. I strongly considered putting out as a play, and I agree. If he gets 12 to 14 carries, which I anticipate he will, he should cruise over that number. This Jets offense, just because of everything that's happening around Braylon, just stay away from me as well.
Coming up next, after we hear from one of our sponsors, Proppy is giving his favorite play of the week. I'm going to give mine as well after we hear from one of our sponsors.
Historic rivals with unforgettable seasons meet in a game of honor. The Army-Navy game presented by USAA, December 14th on CBS.
You know, I didn't want to bring up college football to Uncle Dave. I know you're an NFL guy, but Uncle Dave, your alma mater, Miami, I mean, going to be left out of the college football playoff. I mean, it just seems blatantly unfair. Am I wrong here?
Well, I mean, I just went 2 minutes and 30 seconds on the Seahawks defense versus James Conner and power runs. Would you like me to go 15 minutes on the Miami Hurricanes and why they don't deserve to be in the college football playoff?
Interesting. Well, weaker schedule. And the ACC in general. And that's why SMU.
That's awful. EC, EC, you cannot run on them. They will tackle you. But if you were a 3-star prospect playing behind a conference average offensive line, you would get good numbers against the Miami Hurricanes. They could not stop anybody that they faced on the ground for much of the season. It was,
and that is what, and I appreciate your objectivity there, because I'd be upset if I was, my parents went there, so I was kind of ticked off, but I get it, so I appreciate that.
I watched every second of every game. They absolutely deserve to not go. They deserve to go to the toilet bowl. They will play some other school that doesn't deserve to be in the college football playoff. No one's going to watch the game. No one's going to care. They don't deserve to be in the college football playoff.
Is the winner of this Oregon-Penn State game going to play in the playoff?
Both of them are going to be in the play.
They're
Oregon's
not
number one undefeated.
point
Yeah.
play. The loser will too.
And check out that game at, I believe it's 8 Eastern on CBS on Saturday night. All right, Proppy, your play of the week, 1.5 units. I don't want to say any more, but it seems like a no-brainer. It's a player you have mentioned many times before on this show.
I have run out of superlatives when it comes to talking about this guy. And if you really want to be objective here, he is the offensive rookie of the year. And I'm talking about Brock Bowers. We're going over whatever his number is, but I think it's 69.5 right now. 69.5 receiving yards. I'm playing this up to 74.5 receiving yards. Brock Bowers is not only having the best season by a rookie tight end in NFL history, he's having one of the best seasons by a tight end in NFL history. If we look at his target profile, his receiving profile, all those advanced metrics that we love to look under the hood, it looks like an elite wide receiver one, but he's a rookie tight end playing on an anemic passing offense. This guy is just absolutely out of this world, unbelievable, Brock Bowers. And he has a fantastic matchup this week against both a bad defense, a terrible pass defense, and a team led by Baker Mayfield, who is more than capable of pushing the Raiders into a pass-heavy game script. So this one checks all the boxes for me. I absolutely love Brock Bowers. What's not to love? The guy is playing just unbelievable football. He is the real pick for Offensive Rookie of the Year, and that's despite Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix both having a tremendous season. Obviously, they play the quarterback position, so it's more likely than not likely one of those two will win the award. But Brock Bowers is truly the Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's been absolutely elite in every single metric category, you name it. This is a fantastic matchup. The Bucs, I believe, are the 29th or 30th in EPA allowed per dropback, 32nd in defensive success percentage against the dropback as well. They are going to struggle containing Brock Bowers, as any defense will. Love him to go over 69.5 receiving yards.
All right, so Proppy, would you say that of the all right, I'll go to Uncle Dave for this one. Fantasy Rookie of the Year, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Brock Bowers, for fantasy football only. Now, Jaden Daniels or Nix are going to win it, as Proppy said.
Yeah. But that's not a fantasy award. So
correct.
I believe in most leagues, I would have to go back and check my notes. I can do this if you want me to, EC. I believe Jaden Daniels had a higher average draft position than Brock Bowers. And I believe the quarterback position was deep enough this year to where people were able to use Bo Nix later on, but no one's using Bo Nix as slam dunk must start fantasy quarterback the same way that they are with Jaden Daniels. They are absolutely doing that with Brock Bowers, who's he's like a top 30 overall player in fantasy points per game in PPR. So my vote unquestionably would go to Roma Dunze. No, it's going to Brock Bowers. He's the one who's the fantasy offensive rookie of the year, and a tremendous call by Properoni with cheese.
You know, it's funny, in a CBS Sports Fantasy League that I'm doing with some colleagues here, I drafted Brock Bowers because I missed out on all the top tight ends. And I drafted Hawkinson, and he was hurt for the first 6-7 weeks. And I feel like a genius that I got Brock Bowers in a double-digit round, Dave.
I got ridiculed on my podcast for taking Brock Bowers. I told everybody that I worked with, I'm taking Brock Bowers in round 10, whether I need a tight end or not. And I did.
Wow. I believe you got him in our Dynasty League, too. I'm not sure.
That was not round 10. That was a lot earlier than round 10. But I had to grab him before Propstarz got him.
I will say I missed the boat with draft. Not that I wasn't incredibly high on Brock Bowers, two-time Mackey Award winner, arguably the greatest collegiate tight end in college football history. So I was incredibly bullish on Brock Bowers. I just thought he had the worst possible landing spot, playing on an anemic passing offense with subpar quarterbacks and a second-round tight end who he was going to be splitting snaps with in Michael Mayer. I just thought there couldn't have been a worse landing spot for Brock Bowers. That led me to not draft him despite absolutely loving him. And boy, was that a tremendous mistake on my behalf. So certainly,
The lesson to be learned there is teams draft players with visions in mind of how they want to use them. The Raiders are no different, even though that they're kind of a substandard franchise as far as, things like winning and success and good coaching and good playing. They don't really do that much anymore. Sorry, Raiders fans, but you know it's true. But they had a good vision for how they would use Brock Bowers, and I still don't think they've used him to the level that I thought that they would. Remember, this dude was scoring rushing touchdowns at Georgia. I haven't seen that from Brock Bowers this year, and we might not see it from Brock Bowers this year, but we might see it next year when he's another year older, another year more experienced, and maybe even hulked up even more than he is this year.
This is one of the best pure football players that I have ever seen.
Wow. There's your adjectives for the day. There's your proppy adjectives. Listen, how can I follow up on that? I'm going to try. Let's go to Calvin Ridley over 62.5 receiving yards for the Titans against Jacksonville. I'm going to make this a 1.5 unit play. So this is not only a revenge game because Ridley played for Jacksonville last year and then was, I don't want to say they just let him walk to Tennessee in the offseason. But Jacksonville has by far the worst pass defense in the league. And they play man coverage more than any other team in the league, and they just get smoked by it. They've given up the most yards to perimeter wide receivers. They give up a 69% completion rate. Against man coverage, Calvin Ridley has a 28% target rate. He is third in deep targets among all wide receivers this season. And with Will Levis back over the last 4 games, he has 28 targets and a 46% air yard share. This over-under of 62.5 is too low for me. Uncle Dave, I think you're probably with me based on looking at your rankings. I would play this up to 75 personally. I'm not sure I'm going to the proppy ladder of 100 plus, but I could see one big catch getting us close. So I'm rolling with Calvin Ridley as my 1.5 unit play over 62.5 this week. All right, Uncle Dave, let's get to your play this week for among wide receivers. We're going back to that Carolina and Philadelphia game. Now, if you think about game flow, Philly should be way ahead. Saquon Barkley should be running. So what does that mean for Carolina?
It means they're going to be passing. And as much as I was intrigued by Bryce Young's over on his pass attempts, which I don't think is a bad play, I am much more comfortable taking Adam Thielen. You're going to see on the graphic over 3.5 receptions at plus 102. I got that earlier today. Posted it on SportsLine before the show. And now the line has moved to 4.5. And guess what? I would still hammer that. Thielen had 3 receptions in his first game back. He played just 35 snaps. He had a 67.5% route rate. Last week, he played considerably more. 50 snaps, 78% route rate, and he caught 8 passes. And make no mistake about it, Adam Thielen is not the same playmaker that he was years ago, but he's still savvy enough to find soft spots against zone coverage, and that's helped him become an easy short area target for Bryce Young to lean on. And I fully expect Philadelphia to keep playing zone coverage. They're not a team that plays it, reliably week in and week out at an 80% clip, but they get close to it. They do play a lot of zone, and if they're winning the game against Carolina, they will play a lot of it. And they will be happy for Adam Thielen to catch a bunch of 5, 6, 7, 8-yard passes as Carolina dinks and dunks their way down the field. That's what Carolina did last week against Tampa. Obviously a much easier matchup, but it's the same philosophy that can come out here and help Adam Thielen get 5+ receptions in the game against the Philadelphia Eagles.
Go ahead, Prop.
I like this quite a bit as well. I think Dave made a great point. The Eagles will concede those short area passes. And Adam Thielen at this stage of his career, while he's not prime Adam Thielen, again, is very adept, as Dave mentioned, as finding those soft spots and those seams in both zone coverages. And the Eagles, again, will allow him to get those. And how Dave mentioned, or we mentioned when talking to Brock Bowers, he's almost like a wide receiver playing tight end. Well, Adam Thielen is kind of like a wide receiver that plays tight end. He's like the inverse of Brock Bowers, and just his ability to kind of, work near the line of scrimmage and find seams and get open. So I think, very savvy football player stage of his career, and I think he will rack up at least 5 or 6 receptions.
I want to give Adam Thielen a little bit of credit, if I may, because he was very sharp on his touchdown last week to keep running his route. He didn't stop his route. He didn't slow down. He was running an over route, and he just kept hitting the gas as fast as his little moped would take him on the play. And sure enough, he was still open, and Bryce Young hit him for a touchdown. There was another play where he ran up the seam, kind of curled toward the post. He had the ball in his hands. The ref said that he didn't catch it. Incomplete, but otherwise, those would have been 2 decently long plays. One that did stand, obviously, the touchdown, and the other one on top of it. So he's not like we were describing him like he's as fast as the Flintstones car, but he's really somebody who is capable of getting open and then making a play after the catch, provided that he has space. And we can basically say that about 99% of the players in the National Football League, but he does it. And that's going to keep him on the field, which is an important factor here because the Panthers do have other receivers and a nice tight end that they could mix and match in. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Thielen will play a lot. Falling into 5 receptions should be pretty easy.
And he's
Fair
a
enough.
quarterback's best friend, right?
Yeah.
One of them in this offense.
He's such a technician. He's so short-handed.
That's
just
the
very
word.
reliable. So
Technician.
All right. Prop, I got to ask you about this next one. Our last wide receiver prop on the show. Sauce Gardner, the shutdown corner, formerly a shutdown corner for the Jets, is doubtful and unlikely to play against the Dolphins this week. So Tyreek Hill should go nuclear, right?
wrong, EC. I'm fading Tyreek Hill. I'm very confident in this one, too. Going under, I believe the number is 64.5 receiving yards. I'm comfortable playing this one down to 61 or even 60.5 receiving yards. This is going to be a little bit long-winded. I'm just going to warn you in advance. But
all right, hold on. Let me get comfortable.
Everybody lean back, kick the feet up. But if we look at this Dolphins offense right now, Tua, the quarterback, he's getting rid of the football faster than any other quarterback in the NFL. That is by design. For a variety of reasons. A, to keep Tua upright, to avoid him taking any unnecessary contact. Also because it's been very effective for Miami as well, to give him a lot of gimmies as completions. As a result of that, when you fire the ball out of your hands that quickly, you're primarily looking at short area completions. If we're talking about Tyreek Hill, he's running the majority of his routes down the field. And while he's still getting double teamed at a very high rate, I think 95th percentile, so opposing defenses are still very much afraid of him. He's just not able to draw targets anywhere near the same way he was in previous years. And a lot of that is the function of this Dolphins offense that is going out of their way again to focus on short area completion. So not that I'm calling Tyreek Hill a decoy, but he's really just not making the same impact and not getting anywhere near the same volume. The last time he had a 100-yard game was week 1. That feels like an eternity ago for Tyreek Hill. Then if we look at the opponent this week, we're playing the Jets. The Jets, what are they? They're a significant run funnel. Teams opt to go extremely run-heavy against the Jets. I believe since week 5, only one team has gone pass-heavy. And when I say pass-heavy, if we look at their PROE, pass rate over expected, only one of them has shifted heavier to the pass than what is league average, basically. So teams are opting to run against the Jets. They're still a good coverage team. They rank in, I believe they're number 2 in success rate as far as against the dropback. So still very good pass defense. And again, they do a good job of not allowing explosive plays downfield. And Tyreek is just not getting anywhere near the same opportunities to attack downfield, coupled with the fact that he's still getting double teamed at an extremely high rate. And this Miami offense has completely shifted with how they're choosing to attack teams. So I expect them to go run heavy in this game, as run heavy as they'll permit. They kind of use the short area passing game with Jonnu Smith and Achane as an extension of their run game as well. So I expect them to continue to focus on that, which has really worked for them. And I just don't think the volume's going to be there for Tyreek, who's still making a big impact as far as his real life, what he does as far as drawing coverage. But yeah, just not getting the same volume, just not making the same amount of plays. And I think this is a good spot to fade him. He's more reputation than he is production right now.
Wow. All right. Uncle Dave, your thoughts on that play and Jalen Waddle instead of Tyreek Hill this week? Are you a Waddle fan or a Jonnu Smith fan?
I don't know what the line is on Waddle, but
45.
I wouldn't touch it unless it was in the neighborhood of Tyreek Hill. Look, Tyreek, I think this is a competitive line. I think it's a fair line. The only thing, literally the one thing that Pepperoni Proppy said was that he's not getting as many targets as we're used to. And he's got a bunch of games recently with Tua where he's had 6+ targets, a bunch with 8, a couple with 9. He had 9 last week. So it makes me a little bit nervous to say that he's just not as involved. But to your point, you probably, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you probably would say that he's not getting the same type of target volume that he had, say, last year. And that's obvious. I mean, we're talking about a guy who last year was getting double-digit targets on the regular. He's only done that twice. One of the games he did it in, Tua didn't even play. So I am definitely I don't necessarily – I can't say that this is a fantastic slam dunk bet, but I get where you're coming from. And I think that if I were to take a side, I would take the under. There's also this. The Dolphins have talked a lot about getting their run game going this week. C.J. Mosley was put on IR for the Jets. That's a good run stopper who we're not going to hear from the rest of the season. He's got a neck injury. I actually hope that he's going to be okay. But the Dolphins might focus on that run game this week because that will also take pressure off of Tua Tagovailoa. And that's why I stayed away from Tua's props this week as well. So if I had to lean one way, it would be the under. The last thing I suggest everybody do is go look at Tyreek Hill's touchdown last week and tell me if he truly deserved those yards and that touchdown on the play.
Go ahead, Proppy.
Quality of targets is what I was specifically mentioning. His ADOT has gone from very deep to significantly shallower.
Okay.
Same thing applies for Tua as well. Tua has the shortest ADOT of any quarterback in the NFL this season. Again, and that is by design. He's been extremely effective getting rid of the ball quickly and on these short completions. So they're just not utilizing Tyreek down the field, in addition to there just not being the same volume for him for those downfield targets. In addition to some other factors as well. But I do think they are going to look to establish the run against the Jets, who are a significant, one of the heaviest run funnels in the league.
Well, I know that football is an American sport. I know we have some friends in Canada, and we have one, John, in Ireland, who is watching and chatting with us here on the Friday NFL Prop Show. So, John, welcome, and glad to have you watching from across the pond. This is a spirited program this week, and I absolutely love it. So now, it is time for quarterback props. Uncle Dave, Matthew Stafford cost me last week. He had like 6 yards passing in the first quarter, not getting my over 254.5. But you're going to play an over for Matthew Stafford this week. What is it?
It's his completions, EC, over 23.5 completions. And I love the juice at minus 110. Stafford's been over this prop line in 4 of his past 6 games overall, as well as 4 of his past 6 losses. And that's important considering that everybody, including the odds makers, think that the Buffalo Bills will roll over the LA Rams. It should be a competitive game. I don't think it's going to be a total blowout that the Rams are just getting trounced in, but it's going to be one where they're going to have to throw. And obviously, if Stafford's throwing, he needs to complete passes. That's something that he didn't necessarily have to do last week, nor did he have to do I guess it's 3 weeks ago against the Patriots. Not a lot of volume for Matthew Stafford in those games, but those were games that the Rams handled, and they ended up winning those games. Buffalo, just like Philadelphia, they play a lot of zone coverage in an attempt to keep their opponents passing nice and short. That's good for Stafford. What also helps is that the Bills, in their past 4 games, have allowed the highest catch rate to wideouts who line up in the slot. It's an 86% catch rate. That's real. That's like 9 out of 10 throws that are to the slot receiver are going to get caught. We're looking for those completions. It should mean a bounce back game for Cooper Kupp, who's the primary slot receiver for the LA Rams. And the numbers get actually better than that. The Bills have allowed a 68.5% completion rate on the season to opposing offenses. That's the 7th highest. And that number has actually looked like 74.6 over Buffalo's past 4 games. That includes the blizzard game that they played against the 49ers last week. It should make it easy for Stafford to complete a ton of passes, even if it means losing the games. Over 23.5 completions at minus 110. That's from the ladies and gentlemen at BetMGM.
I respected Uncle Dave. I'm just bitter that Stafford wasn't even close to my line last week. So, I'm kind of hurting.
It was because, you should be bitter that the Saints didn't hold up their end of the bargain.
They did not. No, they did not.
And if the Bills don't hold up their end of the bargain and their offense falls on their face, Stafford's going to lose this. He will not get completions.
Well, it's also a combo play.
It's pretty good.
We love parlays. One of us loves parlays on this show. Kyren Williams under 70.5 rushing yards from Proppy. Uncle Dave, Matthew Stafford over 23.5 completions. I'm just saying. Go ahead, Proppy.
I get asked all the time about parlays, right? And if I do play a parlay, I have to feel like it's correlated some way. So if there was a parlay here, that would be somewhat correlated you could make an argument for both of those props.
See, I don't need correlated parlays, but I have one for you this week, Proppy. I gave out Calvin Ridley earlier in the show, so I'm giving out Will Levis over 206.5 passing yards against that awful Jacksonville pass defense, who is surrendering more than 273 yards per game, which is by far the most in the NFL. Levis has actually been chucking it pretty well lately. He is over this number in his last 3 games, and he is 4th in yards per attempt over the last 4 weeks. He's doing his best Jameis Winston imitation, which is just chucking and ducking. And we love a Jameis Winston imitation at over 206.5 passing yards. There are only 2 quarterbacks that have started this season against the Jaguars who have not hit this. Deshaun Watson in week 2 because he's Deshaun Watson. And Jordan Love, because Jordan Love got hurt. Malik Willis came in and threw for another 50 yards. So other than that, every quarterback is over this. I feel like this number is at least 10 yards too low, if not more than that. So I am playing the over 206.5 for Will Levis. Now, Proppy, if you didn't learn your lesson from last week, game in Minnesota, quarterback under passing attempts. Uncle Dave had it. You went the other way. Uncle Dave won. So let me guess what you decided to do this week with Kirk Cousins back in Minnesota playing his old team.
I actually didn't even think about that. That's funny you bring that up, EC. But yeah, I'm going to fade Kirk Cousins here. Under 34.5 passing attempts. I do want to mention I like fading Kirk Cousins in a variety of ways. All of his props I'll likely have somewhat of a position in. But my favorite is going to be the passing attempts here. Let me explain why. Let's throw that Kirk Cousins revenge narrative out the window because Kirk Cousins is playing absolutely dreadful football recently. I read in a column today that despite having 4 interceptions in his last week's performance, his efficiency had actually improved from the previous game. That's how poorly that Kirk Cousins is playing. And there are people within that Falcons organization that are calling for Michael Penix Jr. to take over at quarterback because he has been absolutely dreadful. And the Falcons are aware of this. Their coaching staff is aware of this. And they are actively trying to hide Kirk Cousins. Now he's facing a very good defense that blitzes at the highest rate in the NFL. Kirk Cousins throughout the course of his career has struggled against the blitz. This is a very good pass defense. Top 10 in EPA allowed per dropback. Top 10, I believe top 5 actually in EPA allowed per dropback. I believe 6 in success rate. So very difficult Vikings defense. Both a good coverage unit and then an extremely good at getting quick pressure. Kirk Cousins has been absolutely dreadful when facing quick pressure this year. And his play, he's had a fairly efficient season if you look at the entire body of work. But if we zoom in recently, he has fallen off of a cliff. And this is going to be an absolutely terrible matchup for Kirk Cousins. Really exploit a lot of his weaknesses. And I think we're going to see, or I believe strongly, I'm very confident we're going to see Atlanta really try to hide him, which they've been doing, and focus on Bijan Robinson, which is by far the most functional part of their offense. So despite playing an elite run defense, I still think Bijan is capable of finding success on the ground because Bijan is also that good, but it's also twofold. They want to limit the amount of exposure and dropbacks because Kirk Cousins' play has fallen off of a cliff. I absolutely love this. Besides Brock Bowers, this is a very close second to my favorite prop this week. I'm fading him under 34.5 passing attempts. I also love him under 245 or 47.5 yards as well.
You know what Proppy's going to do after this show, Uncle Dave? He's going to run down to the sports book. Maybe he'll even throw a parlay with that Bowers play and that Kirk Cousins play. Come on, Prop. You got to at least think about it. You love those 2 plays so much. All right, Uncle Dave, we got a couple of questions from the chat. I want to start with you on one. I'll give Proppy one. Jason said it a little bit earlier on. Thoughts on Caleb Williams passing yards for the week? 222.5. Does he get the new coach bump?
Listen, he's had the new coach bump. I think that number seems too low, like suspiciously low. 49ers defense is getting healthy. I don't know if Nick Bosa practiced on Friday. But
Doubtful this week.
So then he's not going to play. That helps the cause for Caleb Williams. Maybe what's baked into that line is that they're not sure just how effective DJ Moore will be. I know DJ Moore said he's optimistic that he'll play in the game. I would not like that line if DJ Moore was out. So I am not going to touch that until I know whether or not DJ Moore is actually in.
Questionable. Go ahead, Prop.
I thought about fading Caleb Williams this week, actually. Twofold. San Francisco are a significant run funnel. The run defense is porous, and they have a very good pass defense. So I do think it's actually a tough matchup for Chicago. I do think if they're going to run the football, this is the defense that they can potentially do it against as well. So I just wonder how much passing volume there will be for Caleb Williams in a competitive game environment.
See,
Hey, Prop, one more. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, EC. And I'm sorry, we're going a little long here. That's my bad. My diatribe against the Seahawks and all that. But look, I think the 49ers kind of explode this week in a good way. You know, should we use the nuclear term? We could. Niners have been beat up over the last couple of weeks, and they're going to be the healthiest that they've been on defense for the first time in a while. I think that we could actually see the Niners put up a ton of points on Chicago. It'll force Caleb Williams to throw. I don't think the Bears are going to win, but it does make me think that Caleb Williams, if we're going to fade him, I wouldn't necessarily fade this number unless there's no DJ Moore.
Well, I think I'll struggle from an efficiency standpoint is more of my argument.
Oh, I mean, he's been struggling from an efficiency standpoint all year. Yeah.
Well, I agree. I just mean it's a difficult matchup for him.
You know, it's funny. Like, he's been a stud in fantasy because he just falls into this great production every single week. I don't like him as much as I have the past few weeks because I like Brock Purdy better. I think that the 49ers are going to be able to have themselves a heck of a game.
Prop, quick one for you. Jalen Hurts, Eric G brought this up, under 25.5 attempts this week. He is under in 7 of his last 8 games, and we're expecting a blowout. Thoughts?
I think that's a good look. We're taking a very low number here. If Carolina can potentially hang with them or potentially get a lead in the game, then he's likely to go over this number. Obviously, the Eagles being nearly 2 touchdown favorites, certainly working in our favor, but that game script has to go pretty much like according to exactly what the odds makers are suggesting. So a little too game script dependent would be my problem with it.
Where are we making all these bets? We're going to BetMGM and doing it. If you love to play those first touchdown bets and get a gem, like Proppy has had many, I've only had one lifetime, you can actually make money if your player scores second and not first, and here's how. We've all had our first touchdown bet called back before, and BetMGM is giving you a second chance. With BetMGM's Pro Football Second Chance, place any first touchdown score bet. If your player doesn't score first but scores second, get your entire stake back in cash, no opt-in required. Here's how it works. Place a pregame straight first touchdown score bet in any NFL game. If your player scores the first touchdown of the game, win your wager as normal. If your player scores the second touchdown of the game, you'll get your stake back in cash. It's that simple. Log into BetMGM for more details. Coming up next, my kicker prop. I know you guys have been waiting after we hear from one of our sponsors.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged with the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
That streak could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending.
The chaos continues.
Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
All right, it is time for my kicker prop of the week. Matt Gay let me down last week, Uncle Dave, but Jason Sanders in your neck of the woods is not going to let me down this time. He over 1.5 made field goals. A little juicy at minus 135, but he's 5-1 to the over this week or this season. He's had multiple attempts in 10 of 12 games, and the Jets have given up multiple field goal attempts in 7 of their last 9 games. So give me that over 1.5 made field goals at minus 135 in the land of Uncle Dave. As Matt says in the chat, make sure to hit the like button. Please do so. If Sia Najad was still in the chat, he would tell you the same thing. Please do that and support us here at SportsLine. But it is time to bring up the recap screen, Uncle Dave, and let's see what you like here. What is your favorite prop on the board that is not yours?
I am walking into the elevator. I'm letting the doors close behind me. I'm hitting the penthouse button, and I am taking the elevator up with James Cook over 78.5 total yards against the LA Rams.
All right, fair enough. So you can check these out. Just to recap it here, Propstarz under 34.5 passing attempts for Kirk Cousins. He has James Cook over 78.5 rushing and receiving yards, as Uncle Dave just mentioned. Kyren Williams under 71.5 rushing yards. Brock Bowers over 69.5 receiving yards for 1.5 units, and Tyreek Hill under 64.5 receiving yards. I am on Will Levis over 206.5 passing yards. James Conner over 79.5 combo yards. Calvin Ridley over 62.5 receiving yards for 1.5 units. And Jason Sanders over 1.5 made field goals at -135. Uncle Dave loves Matthew Stafford over 23.5 completions. Alvin Kamara's over 81.5 rushing yards. Chuba Hubbard's under 70.5 combo yards. And Adam Thielen's over 3.5 receptions, which he said he would play over 4.5 as well. So it has been a spirited show. A lot of good debate. Uncle Dave Proppy has an HQ hit, so he had to duck out. But always a fun show, and always going back and forth and learning from you and Proppy. So any final words from you on this Friday?
Yeah, I actually do have some final words, and I will be as brief as possible. I had a hard time coming up with props that I really liked this week. I think the books are sharper than they've been at any point this year. Be careful with your bets, guys. And if you heard something that you liked, you want to bet it, okay, that's fine. But you should never bet anything that you don't feel like you are in love with. It's love, L-O-V-E, not like, not okay, not, 3 a.m. at the bar, nothing like that. We're looking for love. And it's okay to pass. You can pass on all of our bets. We're not going to be offended. We want you to win, and we want you to feel good about what you do. And with the books getting sharper, it's going to be tougher for you to pick winners and do it on a regular basis, week in and week out. So please be selective and move forward tentatively.
Love it, Uncle Dave. Good lesson right there. I want to thank producer Jake the Snake. He's been a little under the weather today, but he has been a trooper sticking with us here for the last 56 minutes. Also, for Propstarz and Uncle Dave, I am EC, and as Matt just said in the chat, as I always like to say, let's hit it big.
Big!
Good luck.